Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to take a deep dive into one of the most incredible financial bubbles of all time, the Great Crash of 1929. And we're going to do it using John Kenneth Galbraith's classic book as our roadmap.
Okay, so let's kick things off with the quote that really frames our whole story here. You see, this isn't just about a stock market crash. It's a story about this incredible optimism that went so far it turned into a nationwide illusion. And maybe even more importantly, it's about the people in charge who just stood by and watched it all unfold.
So let's set the scene. Our story really kicks off in the late 1920s. This was a time of what felt like just endless prosperity and this really unshakable confidence in the American dream.
And President Coolidge, in his final address to Congress, just totally nailed the mood of the country. I mean, everything was calm, business was booming, and the future, it looked unbelievably bright. Everyone just kind of thought, yeah, the good times are here to stay, forever.
And look, this wasn't just some fantasy, you know? This optimism was built on a really solid foundation. By 1929, industrial production was hitting all-time highs. And the auto industry, a huge engine for the economy, was churning out over 5 million cars a year. The economy was absolutely humming.
But here's the thing. Underneath all that prosperity, this really powerful urge to get rich and get rich fast was starting to take hold. And the first big warning sign? Well, it didn't come from Wall Street. It came from the sunny swamps of Florida.
You know, the Florida land boom was really the perfect dress rehearsal for everything that was about to happen. You had people buying up land, often sight unseen, not because they wanted to build a house, but because they were convinced they could just flip it for a huge profit tomorrow. It was a textbook speculative bubble, and it ended in total disaster when a couple of hurricanes literally blew the whole dream away.
But here's what's so incredible. The collapse in Florida, it didn't seem to faze anyone. That national obsession with getting rich for doing nothing, well, it just packed its bags and moved north into a brand new arena, the stock market.
And the thing that just poured gasoline all over this fire was a tool called buying on margin. Now what this did was let pretty much anyone control massive amounts of stock with just a tiny bit of their own money. It basically disconnected them from being a real owner and let them focus on just one thing and one thing only, that rising stock price.
So what was the result? Well, it was like a giant river of credit just flooded into Wall Street. This money was called brokers' loans. It was money borrowed for the specific purpose of buying stocks. And get this, the total amount more than quadrupled in just a few years, hitting an absolutely staggering $6 billion.
Okay, so you've got all this money sloshing around, right? It had to go somewhere. And boy, did Wall Street deliver. They came up with a spectacular invention that was just perfectly made for the moment, the investment trust.
Now, these new companies, they didn't actually make anything. No factories, no products. They just owned the stocks of other companies, and then they turned around and sold their own shares to the public. It was, in effect, a way to create a seemingly endless supply of new stock to feed this crazy, insatiable demand.
And their secret sauce, the thing that made them so appealing, was this powerful idea called leverage. See, when the trust investments went up, the profits weren't shared equally. Nope, they were all concentrated on the common stock. So a decent, 50% gain in the market could turn into a mind-blowing 150% return for the trust shareholders. It was like magic.
And you know who was the master of this new magic? No one played this game with more speed or on a more epic scale than the investment firm Goldman Sachs.
Check this out. In July of 1929, they launched a massive trust called Shenandoah. And then, just 1 month later, they topped it with an even bigger, mightier creation, the Blue Ridge Corporation.
Blue Ridge just appeared out of nowhere with an initial capital of $142 million. That was a truly massive, almost unimaginable amount of money back then.
And this is where the story just gets completely absurd. The company that was sponsoring this new giant, Shenandoah, it was also an investment trust, and it was less than a month old itself. So you had a brand new company creating another, even bigger company. It was financial engineering taken to its absolute most ridiculous extreme.
And this quote right here from a Senate hearing a few years later, well, it tells you how the story ended. The stock that Goldman Sachs sold to the public for over $100 a share, Mr. Sachs had to admit it was now worth about $1.75. Just devastating.
So all of this brings up a really critical question, right? With all this insane speculation just running wild, where were the people in charge? Where were the regulators?
Well, this was the really impossible spot the Federal Reserve found itself in. On the one hand, they could step in, stop the boom cold, and then get blamed for causing an immediate crash. Or they could do nothing and just watch as the bubble got bigger and even more dangerous.
So what did they do? They kind of chose a third path, basically inaction, that looked like action. You have to remember, this was the era of laissez-faire, this deep belief that government should stay out of the economy. So they just issued these super mild warnings. It felt like they were more worried about covering themselves for later than they were about actually stopping the frenzy.
And this next part really shows you who held the real power. When the Fed's little warnings caused the market to dip for a second, a banking titan named Charles Mitchell basically told them to get lost. He publicly announced his bank would pump millions back into the market to keep the party going. And guess what? It worked. The Fed just backed down.
And so, with basically zero threat of anyone stepping in to stop them, the market just sailed off into the wild blue yonder. It was setting up for its final, most spectacular climb in the summer of 1929.
The numbers from that summer they're mind-boggling. The market gained more in just those 3 summer months of '29 than it had in the entire record-breaking year of 1928. It was this last crazy euphoric surge into completely uncharted territory.
And this whole delusion was just perfectly captured by one of the nation's sharpest economists at the time. He famously said that stock prices had reached what looked like a permanently high plateau, just weeks before everything came crashing down. It's just a timeless reminder of how blinding that kind of optimism can be. And really, it brings us right back to our central question. The story of 1929 isn't just something that happened a long time ago. It's a warning. The people in power knew what they should do, but they chose not to act. And so the question that echoes through every single boom and bust we've seen since is, have we actually learned our lesson?